one, and this is the designer of her temple. This is Senenmut, the architect of the temple of Hatshepsut in the 18th dynasty. This why you can see why I call it the Temple Age. This is her nephew Tutmosis III. This is one of the high priestesses of the 18th dynastic period. This woman's name is, I picked this because it's such a well-preserved mummy, and if you could, I guess we don't have as clear a shot as I'd like, so you can see hair texture and all is still shown. She looks a lot like a Maasai woman. Her name is Anut Tawi, and that's also 18th dynasty. This is Amenhotep III, the father of King Tut. This is Amenhotep III's wife.
Can you go back to
Yes, we'll go back to Amenhotep III.
Yes. This is who now?
This is King Tut's father. And also Pharaoh Akhenaten's father, the founder of monotheism. Some people think he's the founder. That's not true, but monotheism is older than Akhenaten. That's another program. So this is Amenhotep III. This is Amenhotep III's wife, Queen T. Again, this was a queen that they could easily project just like Nefertiti, but no one ever sees her.
Where are these images? In the textbooks, etc.?
They're not in the textbooks. They're in the Cairo Museum, in the archives. But and she was a very important queen. Now, this is Akhenaten, the son of that king and queen, who became pharaoh and developed a brand new religion and took Egypt in a different direction. This is his wife, Nefertiti. Now you can see why she becomes so famous. When you compare her to Nefertari or to Queen T, she looks more, she has more of the image of a European. She, in fact, according to historians, was Persian, and that she was supposed to marry Pharaoh Akhenaten's father, but he died before Akhenaten, before she could get to Egypt, and so she married the son Akhenaten instead. Now, even though she was Persian, the chances are that she was still African in the sense of race, as shown on this tomb of hers. That's also Nefertiti. Let me show Nefertiti here, and let's look at her tomb. Now, this picture of Nefertiti, we don't even know is Nefertiti for sure. It was found on the floor of an artist's workshop. But this is the most famous image of Kemet anywhere in the world.
You say artist workshop. Artist where?
In Kemet.
Oh, in Egypt. Okay.
In Egypt, yeah. Okay, then we have, this is the material that I was quoting, showing that, according to Moray, she was actually Persian, the daughter of a Persian king rather than Egyptian. These are the daughters of Pharaoh Akhenaten and Nefertiti. They were said to be deformed because they have long heads. In other words, they were not normal Europeans, according to the people who said that. But here are Africans all over Africa who have the same head shape. In other words, that's the most typical head shape that you find in the African population. That's from East Africa and also from West Africa. Okay, here is King Tut, who was the brother of Akhenaten. This is the golden mask. Keep this image in mind when I show you the next slide, because the next slide will be a picture of a news advertisement for the King Tut exhibit in Los Angeles, coming out of the Los Angeles Times. Okay. I want you to show you the real thing, then I want to show you what an artist does, and that will give you an indication of why we should never accept artist sketches. We should always ask for the original document or the original carving if we can possibly see it. So here's King Tut the way he looked to his artist. Here's King Tut the way he looked to the artist in the Los Angeles Times. He's become Caucasoid. And we go back and take a look at the way he really looked. And then this is how he looked in the advertisement at the...
he becomes white.
He becomes white. And this happens frequently with the Egyptian figures as they appear in sketches. And this is the reason that we recommend against the use of sketches in textbooks. Wherever possible, we ought to have photographs. And even better than that, we ought to have the actual object. Because even in photographs, it's possible that the color is not a true rendition of the color, as I indicated with Queen T. In black and white, you really don't pick up the natural color of the statue as it appears, and it's really better to have a color picture. And then, of course, look at what's happened to King Tut by the time it gets to the children. So let's go back and look at this again. We start out with the golden man, the way he looks. This is the way the adult population will pick it up in the advertisement in the newspaper, and this is how we will tell the children about King Tut.
So this is an example of what?
This is an example of actually changing history to deny to African people their own history and to give that African history to someone else.
Because we saw his father earlier.
We saw his we saw him. We saw him. I go back and just look at. This is what he looked like.
That's the mask, though,
That's
right?
the mask. I even have his mummy. You know, I don't have the mummy in the show, but the mummy looks like the mask. Not like the artists who drew these art pictures here in the 1900s. Okay, we skip now on the chart to the 25th dynastic period here. And I'm just going to run through these because there were some other pharaohs, and I just want to be able to give the contrast. Each of these dynasties that I picked to emphasize are the main dynasties. These are the golden ages, not the invaders dynasty. These are the native African dynasties. Now let's look back at the pharaoh. What did he look like? This is Pianki. You had Kashta, Pianki, Shabaka, and so forth in that 25th dynastic period, and Teharka. Okay? Now, this is also the dynasty that is associated with Mexico, 25th dynasty, around 700 BC. We think that we have excellent proof that these were the people who became a part of the Olmec civilization in Mexico and who left their images there in stone. And we don't have time to go into detail about this.
Which would mean that Africans were here.
Were in America before Christ, not just before Columbus, but before Christ. And again, when we say these things, we have, we're not talking about a piece of pottery. We're talking about an actual rock Polaroid of the images of the people.
I like that, rock Polaroid.
Rock Polaroid. See, here they are again. These are the giant Olmec heads outside Mexico City in several places, Tres Zapatas, La Venta, these locations in Mexico. You notice the contrast. Okay, this is no longer a pharaoh. In other words, now we have moved to this period here, which is the Greco-Roman period. And the image that I'm showing you now in the Greco-Roman period is the image of Alexander the Great. So we now have a foreign invader that will establish Greek rule for 300 years. The important thing about these invaders is that they not only establish political rule, but they do something very strange for an outside power. They begin to imitate the culture of the people that they conquered. So they begin to dress like Africans. They begin to embalm their bodies like Africans. They adopt an African religion. They go to school in Africa and pick up African science and go back and create universities like Africans. They build their buildings like Africans and so forth. And
if you were a robot right now, I'd punch fast forward.
Yes, you fast.
I push. That's right. But our time is tight now.
Okay. Well, fast forward. Alexander the Great, the Ptolemaic general following Alexander the Great. Notice he's dressed like a pharaoh here. Here is the Ptolemaic pharaoh on the left, being administered to by Egyptian gods on the Temple of Horus.
So Ptolemaic pharaohs, you're talking about Greeks?
Those are Greek pharaohs who began to recreate. They picked up all these temples that had been knocked down and rebuilt them, but they put their own images on these temples. So many people go to Kemet today and they see these images and they say, well, where are the, we thought you said that these were African people, not knowing that most of those temples were refurbished in the time of the Greeks and the Romans. Yeah. You say that we have to stop now.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I want you to go ahead.
You want me to hurry.
That's right.
Okay, they begin to mummify their bodies. This is an example of Greco-Roman mummies. You saw earlier one mummy of ancient Kemet. Well, Egyptians have been mummifying their bodies for years, but it's a very significant step when people who primarily relied on cremation suddenly shift over and start burying their dead and mummifying their dead that are buried in the African tradition.
Let me ask this question.
Yeah.
Why should black John Q. Public care about all of this ancient history?
Well, for the same reason that white John Q. Public cares a great deal about ancient European history. In other words, you can't go to school 3 days without being reminded of the greatness of Europe.